I'm going to pick up in verse 16, and it reads like this. This is Jesus confronting the Pharisees, and we're going to see just the foolishness of them swearing oaths. So he said in verse 16, "Woe to you blind guides who say, whoever swears by the temple, it is nothing. But whoever swears by the gold of the temple, he is obliged to perform it. Fools," he calls them, "fools and blind, for which is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifies the gold?" And then they say this, "Whoever swears by the altar, it is nothing. But whoever swears by the gift that is on it, he is obliged to perform it. Fools and blind, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? Therefore, he who swears by the altar swears by it and all the things on it. He who swears by the temple swears by it and by him who dwells in it. And he who swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by him who sits on it." And so back over in Matthew chapter 5, let's read 34 and 36. This is what Jesus is saying. So he says, "Do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king, nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black." In Isaiah 66, verse 1, the Lord says that heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. In Psalm 24, verse 1, another famous passage, the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness, the world and those who dwell therein. So Jesus is saying not to swear by any of these things because none of these things belong to us. None of these things we have power or control over. And so the issue is that swearing by any of these things is inappropriate because it implies that we have the authority or the ability to destroy those things, or to change those things, over which only God alone has the authority, the power, and the control. And so what should we do instead? Jesus answered this in verse 37. He says, "But let your yes be yes, and your no, no. For whatever is more than these is from the evil one." In James 5, verse 12, when he's talking about this, he says, "But above all things, my brethren, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, lest you fall into judgment." And so we will be judged for whatever we say or the means of how we would say it. And anything more than this, Jesus is saying, comes from the evil one. So when we swear against God or against God's creation, we align ourselves with the evil one. The evil one attempted to assume the throne of God and his power. And as innocent as it may seem, when we swear, we do the same thing when we swear and take oaths. So a person in everyday conversation would seek to strengthen pretty much their answer or their assertion by an oath if they feel that, hey, they're not being taken serious or they're not being received well by the people in their group. And this practice of going beyond a simple yes and no in our affirmation and denials, it actually springs from the root of untruthfulness or a root of pride, basically, which comes up by our effort to clear our own names or to clear ourselves of any type of suspicion. We should just be able to say yes or to say no, whatever we're asked of or accused of, or if somebody's asking us to do something, it should just be yes or no. Now the question comes to, is Jesus restricting all the oaths? Because if you've read the Bible, you've probably seen some areas where some other big name people have used oaths. And so the answer to that is that he's not restricting every single oath. But the context of what he's talking about here is mainly dealing with among the people, not in the courts. Because also in Matthew, I want to say Matthew 26 and 63 to 64, when the high priest is talking to Jesus and asking Jesus about who he is, he adjures Jesus under oath. He said he puts him under this oath to answer this question, and Jesus indeed answers this question. In Hebrews 6:13, God actually makes an oath. This is what the writer says in Hebrews 6:13. It says, "For when God made a promise to Abraham, because he could swear by no one greater, he swore by himself." Now, why is that? If we skip down to verses 17 and 18, he was determining to show more abundantly to the heirs of the promise the immutability of his counsel, confirmed it by an oath that by two immutable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we might have strong consolation who have fled for refuge to lay hold of the hope set before us, and that hope is in Jesus. And so another example, and I don't have, I'll just give you these references real quick, and you can look at these later, but Paul made several oaths throughout the New Testament as well. So in Romans 1:9 and in 2 Corinthians verse 1 and 23 and 1:20, where Paul is calling God as his witness, and he's calling Jesus Christ as his witness to either something he said or how he felt or something he did. And so the issue is not just oaths in and of itself, but the heart behind it. And so obviously, with God making an oath and Jesus speaking under oath, and then the Apostle Paul, making these oaths, that these things are permissible. So what Jesus is saying that we should do is actually to say what we mean and to mean what we say. In Colossians 4, verse 6, it says, "Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one." And so the main, or at least one of the takeaways tonight as we read through this passage here is, even besides, not lying and not taking oaths to strengthen your word, but don't even try hastily to try to please others or making these promises to make somebody else feel better if you're not really serious or meaningful about it. If it's something that you don't want to do, or something that, hey, you feel pressured to do and you just, you're a yes man, it's like, no, you take a step back. If it's something that you don't want to do, just say no. Or if you can't do it, just say no. Too many times or too often, we agree to help in a lot of different areas or go to a lot of different places or agree to meet with a lot of different people when either we actually don't have the time or the money or the ability, but instead of risking disappointing somebody or making someone sad or whatever, we just go ahead and make a promise, like I promise I'm going to be there. Next week, I promise you're going to be there. Hey, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it this time. But how do you look once you can't fulfill it? You've broken your promise. And now in the eyes of the person that you've made this promise to, now you're a liar. Now your word can't be trusted. And so as Christians, our character and conduct should be enough for our word to be believed without making promises or swearing or taking oaths amongst each other. And so I just encourage you guys tonight to speak the truth in love and be consistent in your speech and continue to reflect the character of God in your life. Where's my little sister girl at? Come on up here, girl. And so I just want to leave you with that encouragement. And again, like the context of what Jesus Christ is talking about is not within the court system, but mainly with one another. Like with either your friends or family or in the market or wherever you find yourself to be. But it's a different story if you find yourself in court and somebody of authority puts you under oath.